Chita National TV Radio Broadcasting Corporation, Sohando State Biosphere Reserve, Dahuria State Biosphere Reserve, present Lake Baikal's Living Shield. Lake Baikal. The sight of it is mesmerizing. Its austere and pristine beauty will make you oblivious of time and human endeavors, for they step back before the majestic power of the lake's shining eternity. Yet, Baikal does not intimidate, nor does it keep its God-given splendor to itself, but shares it generously, generosity being characteristic of Siberia at large. Since time immemorial, the people have revered their old man Baikal and called it the hallowed lake or the holy sea. The crown and mystery of Siberian natural life, Baikal is a treasury of Siberia's spiritual and material culture. But it will yield up its treasures only if man keeps its water clean, the air unpolluted, its ecosystem intact, and if he is equally concerned about the places hundreds of kilometers away from Baikal, on the banks of the rivers and rivulets that carry their waters, big and small, into the lake. In this respect, Transbaikalia is to play a significant part in providing for the safety of Baikal area, all the more so that two of Transbaikalian biosphere reserves perform the function of a living shield protecting Lake Baikal. We now present those reserves and their inhabitants. The grandeur and diversity of the surrounding world is our spiritual wealth, provided we think of ourselves as guests, but not as its antagonist. This world is ready to make our life full of wonderful adventures and unexpected joys. One of such beautiful corners in Transbaikalia is Reserve Dahursky, part of the joint Russian-Mongol-Chinese protected area. The gem of the reserve, the Toray Lake system, is the most extensive wetland in East Asia on the main route of migratory birds. As such, in 1994, it was granted international status. The lakes Barun Taray and Zun Taray are the biggest in the south of Chita Oblast in terms of territory. With a small branch, Utochi, connecting them, they make up a reservoir, a relic of a larger lake that existed in ancient times. In those prehistoric times, the left bank of the river Onon, the main water artery of southeast Transbaikalia, was elevated. The river did not flow northwards. It emptied into a lake, of which Barun Taray and Zun Taray are relics. Through a succession of natural changes, today the Onon flows into the river Amur. But the lakes are still there, about 2 meters deep, and the rivers Emalka and Ulza drain into them. Lake Barun Terai is famous for its islands, as many as 10 normally, depending on the lake's fluctuating water storage. The unique physical geographic characteristics of the Terai lakes account for the remarkable diversity of birds. Of 300 kinds that nest there, 150 are found in the reserve. Quite a few of them are listed in Transbaikal Red Data book, as well as in that of Russia. In the period of migration, the area is visited by numerous bird species, among them the relic gull, the silver gull, the big cormorant, the dry-nosed goose, the gray heron, and many others. The population of virtually all bird species depends on the lake's water level. As the lakes dry up once every 15 or 20 years, the birds disappear and come back only after the basins fill up again. But then again, if the water is too high, it floods the islands and the birds' nesting and breeding spots. Dahursky is the first reserve in Russia to appear in the steppe environment. Its creation made it possible to provide for and make a research of the relatively well-preserved steppe spots in the Terai Lake area. The latter is important to do since those spots are most typical of the steppe zone of East Siberia. Of 45 kinds of mammals that occur in southeast Transbaikal, you will find 41 here. One of them is a ruminant called Zeren. Once a typical representative of the Terai fauna, this antelope has become virtually extinct by the 1970s, but fortunately has migrated from Mongolia to Transbaikal of late. The territory of the Dahursky Reserve occupies about 45,000 hectares. Apart from the Terai water and land surface areas, the reserve includes 58,000 hectares of coniferous forest that emerges like a precious gem in the steppe scenery. The rocks in Aldunchilon, a majestic nature monument, will soon be joined to the reserve too. A few kilometers west of Reserve Dahursky, the taiga recedes to give way to the steppe and to reveal another reserve, Sohando, so named after the peak that rises 2,500 meters above sea level. Here, among corries and cirques, lies the blue necklace of lakes, Ukukun, Ogduri, Naria. From here spring up the mountain rivers that flow towards the Arctic and the Pacific seas. One of them, the Chikoi, is one of Lake Baikal's big tributaries. The panorama of the reserve is a feast for the eye. The forested ranges, alternating, seem to rise and fall like the waves of the endless green sea. At the foothills, your eyes are feasting on the colorful tapestry of alpine grassland. Bears come there in summer to find food, coolness, and refuge from swarming midges. Below the alpine grassland, on the southern slopes, stretch deciduous forests. In spring and summertime, the sight of white anemones, of blossoms of marsh tea, clover, sweet peas, geranium, and wild carnation will make your heart throb with delight. The wild orchid is, of course, a rare sight, but then it's all the more rewarding. The fauna in the reserve is diverse too. Since the natural habitats of Siberian, Mongol, and East Asian animals overlap, you can meet both the tundra and the desert inhabitants. Widespread here are the big brown bear, the wolf, the lynx, the wild boar, the musk deer, and the Manchurian deer. If you visit Lake Ugduri in June, you may see the elk that comes to the shore to enjoy the alga. It's an extremely cautious animal, so it must really take good luck to see him. with the warm weather setting in, birds come, of which many are rare species, like the Dahour crane. Unfortunately, the reserve Dahursky and Sohandor have known damage. The cause is almost always man, even though he may not be found at the scene of the crime. Forest and steppe fires are fatal to the wildlife. They exterminate the nests, the vegetation, burn the animals and birds alive, deprive them of food supply, ruin their natural habitat. The river Chikhoi, along with other rivers, is responsible for supplying Baikal with clear, fresh water. Ironically, the said riverside has no status of protected area, although several of its tributaries originate in Sohandinsky Reserve. Therefore, the order of the day is the creation of a national park, which would provide for the conservation of the flora and fauna of the river's upper reaches. A corresponding project was launched over 10 years ago. It was sponsored by the American Agency for International Development. 2 field expeditions in 1995 focused on the development of ecotourism, with a view to affiliate the prospective Chikhoi National Park with Baikal International Ecotourist Belt. Unbelievable, but through the opposition of the local administration, the work was suspended. To make it still worse, the local population are divided in their attitude to the project. Lake Baikal. The name has long become a symbol of man's interaction with nature. If Baikal endures in purity and safety, the well-being of the planet will endure for hundreds of years and years to come. If Baikal is endangered, man can lose it. But what he will lose is not just a lake. It is the paragon of nature's creation, an irreplaceable loss. The living shield of Transbaikalian reserves is committed, even if at a distance, to protecting the holy sea.